Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 990 just came out and the action is in full swing. It's actually crazy to think that for most of Wano, like Wano Act 1 and especially Act 2, had very, very little action. There was not a lot of, extended combat going on during those parts. And I say especially Act 2 because we got no serious Luffy fights in Act 2. Zoro, we got that quick fight with Killer, for example. But beyond that, there wasn't a lot of long extended action sequences for a good 40 or so chapters. But now, it's basically going to be one extended action sequence, at least from here all the way till the end of Act 3, and God knows how long Act 3 is going to be. Maybe it's ending at chapter 1000, maybe the entire battle plays out over the course of Act 3, in which case it's probably going to be another 50 or so chapters at the minimum. But it's just cool to see One Piece being so action-oriented again. Not to say that, the story build-up is obviously more important than the finale action scenes, or at least as important, but it's finally, that payoff period of time where all of that story build-up is finally culminating in the big battle, and it's just cool to see, it's very Marineford-esque, what we're seeing right now, at least throughout this chapter, where you see, hordes of enemies going at hordes of enemies, and you see, little glimpses and snippets of various characters just in the fray. And we haven't gotten anything like that in a little bit. It's been a good, maybe towards the end of Whole Cake Island, but even in Whole Cake Island, the protagonists were a very small group, maybe Dressrosa, but honestly, Marineford is the only thing that's really comparable to what's going on right now, and it's just going to keep building from here. This reminds me very much so of the start of Marineford, where we're just seeing all of Whitebeard's crew, jumping off the ships, landing on the actual Marineford Island and charging in, and then the Marines throwing their guys at them as well. It's just really cool to see. One Piece has set up this war, so well, and I just think that One Piece, at least among shonen, is the best at doing these sort of large-scale wars. So I'm looking forward to the continuing stretch of Act 3 that we have here. Now, in terms of what actually happened throughout the chapter, we start with Sasaki's stuff. There's not much there because Sasaki and Kyoshiro, I can't even tell right now whether or not that's being set up for a fight. I like to think that we're going to get to see a bit of a fight, but at the same time, Kyoshiro is currently occupied with Kaido, so whether or not Sasaki is going to be able to get up to the top of Onigashima and actually have a bit of a skirmish with him, who's to say? And on top of that, in terms of my personal preference, I would like to see Sasaki go to, one of the Straw Hats, preferably Jinbei, because, Fishman versus Fishman matchup, that just seems cool to me on paper. But I just generally would like to see a lot of the Tobiropo, as many of them as possible, go to the Straw Hats, because I just want to see fights for them. I'm not to say I don't like the Scabbards, but if anybody's going to be getting the more special fights, I would prefer it to be the Straw Hats. So the idea of Sasaki versus Kyoshiro, cool, but I'd rather it be Sasaki versus Jinbei or something along those lines. Now, that being said, it does look like we are going to get Inuarashi and Nekomamushi versus Jack. Now, a lot of people know that for a long time I've been saying that Luffy versus Jack is going to happen. I still strongly believe that, but I'll explain my thoughts on that in a minute, basically how I think Inuarashi and Nekomamushi versus Jack is going to go. I'll start by talking about the Minks. This, I'm not going to say I feel like disappointed isn't the right word. It's more so maybe my expectations were too high. But look, one of my favorite chapters in Whole Cake Island was the Sulong transformation, largely because it was visually just such a cool chapter to read, right? The way that Oda depicted the Sulong transformation just for Carrot was just such a, it lent itself artistically to a lot of really, really cool shots. Now, I had been hoping that the mass Sulong transformation would involve, that same level of effort, but times 20 with all these Sulongs going off and everything like that. And I was hoping for a lot of close-ups of these different transformations and everything like that. That was probably asking for too much. Oda's a weekly mangaka writer or artist. It's hard to put in that same level of effort into each one of these Sulongs. So, we get to see them kind of en masse, but we don't, it's not going to be the same as with Carrot, right? It's not going to be that same level of detail or effort put into each Sulong. And that's totally understandable. There's a lot more going on this chapter. All I can say is I hope that at least with Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, I like to think that's why he kept them as silhouettes for this chapter, because, at least with them, he's probably going to put in, hopefully, that same level of, Carrot type effort, because they're the strongest Minks, so I hope to see them in, I hope that their forms, their fully powered up forms are just as badass, if not more so than Carrot's. Now, that being said though, it was cool to see all of these Minks flying around in Sulong form, like literally flying around, like tearing through the Beast Pirates. And mad respect to Jack, because it looks like Jack's the one holding down the fort essentially for all of the Beast Pirates, because he's not going down to these Sulongs. And that's actually really impressive if you think about it, because like, a little bit of power scaling here. I would assume that Carrot is not as strong as like the Musketeers or like the main Guardians or whatever, right? Like Carrot is, she seems strong for a Mink. Definitely strong for a Mink, but I don't know if she's got that rank or whatever yet. Like, she's not Pedro. I would assume Pedro is above her and such. Obviously, the Duke's way above her. But we saw from Carrot's Sulong transformation just how ridiculously effective that was. Even against someone like Daifuku, he was having trouble catching her. He couldn't catch her, and she just tore through basically a small fleet of ships by herself. So to think that Minks that are just as strong as Carrot, if not stronger than Carrot, are all also in Sulong form, and they're not able to take down Jack, I mean, that's really big. I think it's easy to forget or kind of underestimate just how strong Jack is supposed to be, because, he's had some not so good showings in the past, but to be fair, that probably just means that those characters, Inarashi, Nekamamushi, Ashura Doji, they're meant to be very strong characters. Obviously, Zunisha's an island. I think there's no shame in losing to a literal island. So I just think that this is a good little showcase of how strong Jack is actually supposed to be, and what a tank he is. I mean, I talked about that in my, Luffy versus Jack theory video, but like, Jack's main strength so far, to me at least, has seemed to be just the fact that he's a tank. Like, it's really hard to put him down. Like, he goes through a lot of damage and takes a lot of damage. You could call them L's or whatever, but he takes a lot of damage, and it's just really hard to put him down. Like, he'll keep fighting for 5 days. He'll survive an island hitting him, etc. So I think that's really cool to see, a bit of Jack, getting some sort of spotlight in terms of how strong he is, just holding down all of these Minks while Kaido's just chilling. Also, it's kind of funny to me that Kaido has not done a damn thing so far. Kaido has literally just been in that same pose, I think, for 3 chapters now. Like, Kaido has not moved. I don't know when he's gonna actually start fighting. Hopefully it's in the next couple chapters, obviously, but I could easily see Oda just having him chill there till, like, things reach a certain intensity. Maybe that's 3-4 chapters down the line. Definitely before chapter 1000, I like to think we're gonna get to see Kaido fight. But anyway, so besides that, I do think Inuarashi and Nekamamushi, as much as I've been praising Jack, I do think that he is about to get run over by Inuarashi and Nekamamushi. They're in Sulong form. They're together. There's just no reason that this shouldn't be like an easy wash for them, basically. Like, it's just, if one of them at a time was able to go toe-to-toe with Jack, like pretty much literally even with Jack, then both of them together should really swipe the floor with him. And both of them together in Sulong form, so a much stronger form than they were originally when they fought him, should just be over. It shouldn't even be that much of a tussle, to be honest. So I do think, I still think that Luffy versus Jack is going to happen. Keep in mind, I also think that, I personally think that the Wano arc does not end here with this battle. So I think Luffy versus Jack, whenever that does happen, it could easily happen a little further down the line. I don't think that Luffy versus Jack has to happen here, or even that it's necessarily going to happen here. So I could easily see the Dukes getting some quick revenge on Jack before moving on to Kaido, and then, getting basically, the tables will probably turn at that point, because I don't see the Dukes, even in Sulong form, having a shot at Kaido whatsoever. So I could definitely see the Dukes getting their revenge in here quick, not necessarily taking Jack out of the equation, but definitely, handing Jack a quick loss, which there's no shame in, because the Dukes are very strong. They're together, they're in Sulong form, etc. And then I still think that Jack's actual final fight will be with Luffy down the line. So that's my thoughts on that. Going down below, we have kind of basically confirmation from last chapter, the idea that the numbers, they're so big. How big are they supposed to be actually? Are they actually supposed to be oars sized? Yes, I think this chapter was confirmed. The numbers are supposed to be, we're supposed to take them as oars-sized creatures. And obviously they don't look as big as oars, but that's because, Oda and his perspectives and stuff like that, you really need to get certain characters out in an open field sort of setting to really, when he wants to show you exactly how tall a character is, like, there'll be a certain format, if that makes sense. Like Kaido in his original first appearance in chapter 795, he looked absolutely huge, right? Since then, there are lots of scenes of him like indoors or talking to his henchmen in Onigashima or whatever, and like he would just look smaller because Oda just needs to fit things into certain panels and stuff like that. But you know, with the numbers, for example, if you go back and see the original chapter that we saw their silhouettes in, right, just their silhouettes, they were absolutely huge. Like in their original chapter, when they're arriving for the banquet, they look really, really, really big. Like they look like they could be Oars sized easily. Like easily look like they could be Oars sized. They haven't looked like that since then at all, even in this chapter. But I get what Oda is saying, in that like we're supposed to take these as Oars sized creatures, even if they don't necessarily look like that at this very moment, because he's having to squeeze things. So we've got 10 Oarses, right? 10 Oarses. I really like this because I generally like when anytime we get a sort of reference point for the Straw Hats from pre-time skip to post-time skip. We got this before with the Pacifistas. We're getting it kind of again here with the numbers, which again are supposed to be more Oarses. So, you know, we saw that the Pacifistas took the entire crew to take down. Oars similarly took the entire crew just to, the entire crew, you know, going all out for like many chapters to be able to take down. So I really like having the reference points, because the jump from pre-time skip to post-time skip for the Straw Hats is ridiculously drastic. Like they go from everyone together being needed just to beat a Pacifista to now, you know, Luffy's Rowan Sanji can just like one-shot him, right? So there's actually not that many reference points we have to go off of, because it's like, it's not like we're probably going to see the Straw Hats like fight Gecko Moria again. Now, like Lucci, for example, he's gotten stronger, so, you know, even if they ran into him again, he's not really a reference point. I would bet that Crocodile's not really a reference point either, because Crocodile's probably gotten stronger. It's just hard, like, we're not going to get that many opportunities to see, like, A to B comparisons of, like, oh, this is how hard it was for the Straw Hats to beat characters back then. This is how hard it is for them. I mean, this is how easy it is for them now, right? Because there's not as many things that kind of stay static, like the Pacifistas, right? But Oars is like a great reference point, because, you know, if Oda's basically saying that, like, these are Oars-sized creatures, they're basically Oars replicas in a sense, not exactly Oars, but like his size, and his size was the main problem that they had with him, then now, yeah, we get to see basically here's how the Straw Hats would do against Oars in the modern day. And we've got 10 Oarses, but it's like super casual for them to take on a threat like that at this point. So I just think that, you know, this was a great inclusion by Oda. I still, again, personally think that this is not the end of the Wano arc, so I don't think that this is the last we're going to see of the numbers. So I do think we're going to get to see the Straw Hats just, like, beat him around a little bit, but I could still see the possibility of that theory that people have been talking about, of, like, Usopp by himself taking down all of the numbers, which I think would be really cool to see. So the little fight scene that we got here, I really enjoyed it. It was juxtaposed with the scenes with Hawkins, X-Drake, Who's Who, and then finally Queen, which I thought was like a little clever way for Oda to time things up. So starting, of course, with Hawkins' prediction, that man is, you know, only 1% chance to live. I saw some people throwing around like little speculations of like, who could it be? I mean, to me, isn't it very obviously Luffy? Like, why would Oda write it about anyone besides Luffy? Because if you're saying like, oh, he only has 1% chance to live, you only really write that in if it's like, you know, if it's like the idea that, oh, the character is actually going to survive, you know? If you're saying that, oh, they've only got a 1% chance to live, then yeah, that means they're probably gonna live, right? Like you're just making, you're saying that to make it sound like it's very likely they're gonna die here, but ultimately they're gonna prevail, right? So that's Luffy, right? Like, why would you write that about something like Law? If you wanted to say Law, then you would say, I don't know, like a 0% chance to live, and then later on show us that's Law when Law dies, if that makes sense, right? Like that 1% thing, or like whenever you give a character like a really low chance of success, that means that more than likely you're writing that character to succeed against all odds. So to me, that's just Luffy. Like, I don't really know what the speculation is here. Maybe I'll be proven wrong like some chapters later or whatever, but to me that just seems, I don't know why that's even like a theory type thing. To me, that's just Oda's obviously talking about Luffy, in my mind. So I thought that's cool that Hawkins is still doing his little prediction thing. I really like the idea that Hawkins' abilities are, extremely advanced future sight, but he has to access it, like he has to really sit down and like think and meditate and stuff, so it comes out in different ways, kind of like, Charlie has to play with her little crystal ball thing or whatever, and, Katakuri's just got it, on call, like on command all the time and or whatever, so different uses of future sight. I would like to think that's what Hawkins' ability is, but just in general, I really like the idea of Hawkins' abilities because there's like so much stuff that could come out of them. I think we barely scratched the surface. I also think Hawkins is a lot stronger than people give him credit for because Hawkins has yet to have drawn the best card in his deck. Okay? Anybody who's played a card game before, what do people, like Hearthstone or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, right? You know that a lot of it comes down to RNG and like if you draw your right cards. So if you brick and you draw your bad cards, then you'll lose. But if you draw your best cards, it's like a whole different ballgame. So for example, for Hawkins, I love that he's that type of character because people have been like trying to power scale Hawkins, which I think is ridiculous so far because he hasn't drawn his best cards, right? You think that Law did that, like Law low diffed Hawkins when Hawkins drew the best cards in his deck? I don't think so. We saw him draw a couple of good cards against Zoro, but it didn't sound like he drew his absolute best cards. So Hawkins is a very interesting prospect to me because I think we have no idea how strong he can actually be. If you remember, going back to pre-time skip, Hawkins was the, third highest Supernova bounty, right? So Oda was building him up at that time. And even if you go to the New World, characters will often list some of the more infamous or notorious Supernova who've been making big waves, and like Hawkins' name frequently comes up. Like that happened in Punk Hazard, like Brownbeard was talking about Supernova. Like it's happened a few times basically where like important Supernova names come up and Hawkins is always in the mix. So I think Hawkins is probably the most underrated Supernova at the moment because if Oda started by writing him in as the third highest bounty, I would bet that Oda always planned on him being a very significantly strong character. He was also the last one to go down to Kizaru pre-time skip and such. So I think that just generally there's going to be more in store for Hawkins, and Oda's kind of just like keeping him on the down low for the moment just to surprise us with how strong he actually is down the line. Overall, I thought it was a great little twist. I did not expect that the Beast Pirates had already known that X Drake was a rat this entire time, or a double agent, or whatever you want to call him. But what's interesting is that is how Oda did it, with juxtaposing it with the actual fight scene, so that the timing of it with, Zoro cutting the club, and then Luffy preparing the Kong gun, not a King Kong gun, he's not trying to destroy Onigashima, and Luffy preparing a King Kong gun, and then cutting back to the scene to show X-Drake doing his big escape so that he can time it up with Luffy hitting a number just as X-Drake comes in and also throws out his attack. I thought that was great. Nice little way to finish the chapter and have X-Drake basically join the fray, but on the Straw Hat side. As for X-Drake going forward, I think it's very hard to tell. Basically, like, we know for the immediate conflict, and we always kind of assume that all of the Supernovas would ultimately be on one side against the Beast Pirates. X-Drake, I don't know if that's going to be the case, like he's going to be a Luffy ally going forward, like just for the indefinite future, pretty much, kind of like Law has become. And I kind of wouldn't like that to be the case. But again, Oda's kind of setting up the pieces, so we've already got Luffy, Law, and Kid on one side. X-Drake has basically moved over. Now we still need Hawkins and Apu. Apu, I don't know at this point if he's ever going to be joining the Straw Hat side, or if he's just stuck on the Beast Pirate side. But I do think my personal theory and stuff, and I'm not going to bring that up too much here, is that Apu definitely will be fighting against the Beast Pirates by the end of this. But I do think at the very least, like, the biggest sign of that is simply the reasoning he gave for joining the Beast Pirates, which was like, and this goes back to his interaction with Kid much earlier, which was that it wasn't anything malicious necessarily. It was simply like the logical, practical path, which was, we can't beat these guys, we can't beat a Yonko, we can't beat Kaido. Like, this is just what I had to do. So I think I would like to see at the very least with Apu like a sort of realization or something like that this is possible, or a sort of redemption moment. And then with Hawkins, it does seem also like he's going with the more logical route of like, this is what I have to do. But I do think that his intentions are kind of a little more obscure at the moment, like his full plan, because I like to think that he's the smartest of the Supernova that are at least on the Beast Pirate side. Like, I'm not going to say he's smarter than Law, because Law's a very smart character. But I like to think that Hawkins is the smartest of the Supernova that, you know, are currently on the anti-alliance side, basically. So I like to think that he's playing some sort of a game. All that being said, I think next chapter, I think from here to chapter 1000 is basically, again, just going to be ramping up the action more and more. The way that the fights are going to break down, I still think that we're going to have, because I still personally think that this is not going to end in success for the Alliance. So I think that they are going to ultimately succeed in getting to the roof, probably around the time that Kaido's wiping the floor with the Scabbards. I think that they will suffer a significant defeat around then, and that I think that's basically how the act will likely end. So I think from here to about chapter 1000 will be them getting up to the roof, getting some chapter of Scabbards versus Kaido, and then basically it ending with things going south for the Alliance once they actually get to Kaido. I also think that's a big reason why Big Mom has been moved out of the picture. I didn't like how Oda necessarily did it, with like just rolling her away like she's, you know, Yama from Skypiea. Like, it was just a very BM-y way to do it. But I do think that like kind of having Big Mom come back at like a really crucial moment where it's like things go from bad to worse, like maybe things are already going bad for the Alliance and then Big Mom comes back and makes it even worse. I think that would be very effective. So just in general, I think that we are going to get some sort of rising hope for the Alliance, probably definitely as they travel up towards the top of the skull. And then hopefully around then a sort of crushing defeat or something like that. At least that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I believe will happen, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think Act 3 will close around then. So that's all for this video. If you enjoyed, then definitely like, comment, and subscribe. And I will talk to you all next week.